4 p.m. in California. Right now, there are now 6 fires scorching the greater Los Angeles area. 60 hours into the fires, and the 2 biggest ones remain 0% contained. And there is 0% chance of rain for the next week. We're just learning of a new fire in Calabasas that is north of Malibu. We're going to try to get some of the maps up here. You can watch the fire drops as they're having. That's one of the scout helicopters right now going in. So they go in to scout ahead of the airdrop that comes in next. And you can see them whipping around and going out to some of the flames out there. This is one of the helicopter pictures coming into us. The fires have exploded in size. A combined 19,000 acres. That's roughly half the size of Washington, D.C. Now, what still remains is what is called the Palisades fire. It is the largest, and it threatens the most densely populated area. This was the first one. This is it. So if you orient yourself, this is where LAX is, downtown Los Angeles, Malibu here. The Palisades fire burned down this area. These are the canyons in a lot of the more affluent regions, and the Pacific Coast Highway is here. Santa Monica, these areas is where the Palisades fire is burning. This now fire here, the Woodley fire, is the one that is beginning. No, this has been put out. We don't have the 6th fire. The Calabasas fire would be right about here. That is just now starting. Obviously, every fire that starts, you've got to divert resources from these fires to try to deal with it. The major focus right now for firefighters, the front line of what is called the Eaton fire, 0% contained. Pasadena, that we all know, Altadena, which is where we had so much of the destruction yesterday. That's where Brian Enton was. And this is the danger. Mount Wilson and all of the communication towers there. Radio, television, and emergency communication towers. So these towers here, they're up on a high hill, Mount Wilson, overlooking all of Los Angeles. If they get knocked out by the flames, it would upend the critical lines of communications, not only between the first responders on the ground, but also those in the air. So it would make the already hard job of fighting these fires from the air almost impossible, because they would not be able to communicate with the spotters and with the groups on the ground. If firefighters are going to get an upper hand on these fires that will come from the air, right now they are able to fly aerial drops. That may change in the next couple of hours. So let me show you why this is so important for the airdrops. All of these new fires and homes are in canyons and up canyons. That makes it almost impossible for firefighters on the ground to stop the flames until they actually get to the houses. And then it's too late. For those of us who don't know Los Angeles very well, myself included, we want to sort of give you a sense of exactly where these fires are to things that we know. So here you go. Key landmarks. The Palisades fire is inching along the Pacific Coast Highway. That's pretty obvious. It runs along the Pacific Coast. We saw the homes in Malibu there go up in flames. That is coming towards the Santa Monica Pier, the famous pier with the Ferris wheel. Fires already moved through the Will Rogers State Beach. The pier is 3 miles away. And currently there is an overnight curfew in Santa Monica. So these are the kind of flames that are coming down here along the PCH. Panic is starting to set in Hollywood. This is video of gridlock traffic on Hawthorne Avenue, located right here in densely populated Hollywood. Sunset Boulevard. This video was taken just steps away. This is the video from what is called the TCL Chinese Theater, and then what we all know, the Hollywood Walk of Fame. This is Paramount Pictures, their big lot here. We're not talking about a very far distance. The Rose Bowl has been dedicated a level 2 evacuation warning. That is the second most severe, not serious enough to force people out yet. This is the Rose Bowl Stadium. This is the Eaton fire, as we said. Mount Wilson's up here. So the fire comes down here. Anyone around the Rose Bowl has been told to get ready to get out. 179,000 people under evacuation orders as we speak. That is enough to fill the Rose Bowl twice. And as these fires spread, there is more than $2 trillion of property at stake. We're starting to see just how much damage the fires are leaving behind. This is Malibu along the coast. And we want to show you some of the before and after imagery. This gives you a sense of the complete and total devastation. The fast-moving fire wiped out the famous Will Rogers Ranch House. This is a structure that dates all the way back to the 1920s. Now it is gone. Same thing happened to businesses in Malibu. A restaurant called Moon Shadows. There's the before, and you can now see the after. It is nearly unrecognizable. Our affiliate KTLA also caught the exact moment a local Taekwondo studio collapsed. This is what it looked like a couple of days ago. Screen right. This is what's left. No firefighters there even trying to save it. Firefighters and police now face even a more dangerous challenge as they spend now their third night on the lines. They are fatigued beyond words. And now the fires are moving up into the canyons. As we said, there is yet another fire that has started. We start tonight with NewsNation's Nancy Liu in Pacific Palisades. Nancy, at some point where you are, there's nothing left to burn. Does that mean the firefighters have moved on?
Yes, because there are other spots for them to focus their attention on. And, you know, Leland, you mentioned so many fires, so many areas, and I've covered multiple major wildfires, and I went to Lahaina, and in the wake of them, you know, it could be the same place because they all end up looking the same, like a vast wasteland like this. I mean, it is just home after home that are wiped out, gone. It looks like a war zone, but it's sad. It's a fire zone. It's and I have to tell you that we have not seen any assessing out here, so we don't know. I mean, are there human remains in some of these places? We don't know, but let's pan over and show you. This goes on for blocks and blocks and blocks, just a massive area of destruction. But Leland, we can tell you that what we do notice more of is like firefighters with water to fight the fires that are left. We saw an active fire scene earlier, and water was coming out of the hydrants. We've also seen, Leland, homes with private security. The homes that haven't burned, we've seen private security sitting outside because of looters that are at work in these neighborhoods, Leland.
I've covered a lot of war zones, and I've never quite seen destruction like what is there, sort of the absolute nature of everything leveled and gone, turned to ash. A couple of things, Nancy. Good news that there is now water, although that I think is a pretty low bar. I think you bring up a great point about how many more dead we are going to find and learn about. Here is the sister of a man who died trying to save his home. Take a listen.
I fell to the ground and I didn't want to look at him. They just told me that he was lying on the ground and he looked serene, as if he was at peace.
Boy, and you can imagine the fear people felt. Nancy, have you gotten a chance to talk to people as they're coming back? I would imagine some of them are still in shock.
Yeah, technically, Leland, this area is closed off, and residents are being told that they should not come back yet. But people are on scooters, people are on bikes. And we even heard about a woman who walked all the way from Santa Monica, 5 miles up here into Pacific Palisades to find everything gone. A lot of people are walking in to find everything gone. A lot of people, too upset to talk to us. I found one man who said, he lost everything, but yet he's alive and he feels guilty for talking. He feels guilty because others have lost their homes and perhaps a loved one. So he felt guilty talking to me because
Nancy,
he's okay.
Yeah, well, that feeling of gratitude is one that I think we all have to keep in mind. It's amazing how disaster brings that out. Nancy, it's your third night on the lines with us, on the fire lines with us. Our thanks to you. I believe your photographer's Nate, correct? Who's been with you this whole time?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Incredible work. Incredible work.
And
you guys,
I want to mention that last night, his home was in the evacuation zone in Hollywood Hills. So we raced over to the Hollywood area because you saw that evacuation. It was crazy up in the Hollywood Hills area. That fire was put out, thankfully, because that would have swept down and could have, threatened downtown Los Angeles.
Wow. Nancy, our thanks to you and Nate. Keep up the good work. I know it's hard. The emotional toll and the fatigue is real in situations like this as we watch and experience it all together. We appreciate it. Nancy, thank you very much. With us now, Chief Chad Augustine of the Pasadena Fire Department. Chief, I appreciate you being with us. Let's look forward. I get it's a little bit like whack-a-mole, but what is the plan? How do you go from 0% contained on at least 3 fires to getting a handle on things?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And really, the plan is having adequate resources. And we, very early in this fire, we requested 60 additional strike teams. And over the last 24 hours and into the next 24 hours, we have strike teams coming from up and down California, Arizona, Idaho, Utah. And while we're able to do that, that allows us to get enough resources on this fire, as well as having a good work to rest ratio. And then the other thing that's vitally important is that the winds cooperate so that we can get aircraft into the air to really make a dent in this fire.
I know that is needed, is for the winds to lay down. I am looking at the bottom of the screen, which is written by our producers. Fire expected to pick up with strong winds. So I'm hearing that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, right? And I'm here at the iconic Rose Bowl, which, a week ago we had the Tournament of Roses and the Rose Bowl game. Now it's ground zero for our incident command post and staging area. We have calm winds here right now, but if you're flying up near Mount Wilson, which you were just talking about, there's very erratic winds, which is limiting some of our air attack operations.
There's now this 6th fire that's popped up. At some point, do we have to ask ourselves how all of these are starting?
Yes, well, we're in January. We've had almost no rain in over 250 days. We continue to have red flag conditions, single-digit humidity, and then you throw in, 40, 50, 60 mile an hour wind gusts. A single spark can cause a very devastating fire, and that's what we continue to see.
All right, Chief, you're talking about 24 to 48 hours before these strike teams get out on the lines. And I know they're in some ways just replacing people because you're going to pull off people who've been working doubles and triples in the heat and on the hills. There's no rain in the forecast for at least a week, maybe even longer. Are we in a position where there's going to be a lot more homes to burn over the next 24, 48 hours? I know it's not what you want, but that it's going to happen.
No, I don't believe so. That fire in that first 24 hours was devastating, and I was able to fly the Pasadena and Altadena area much of the fire today, and the amount of devastation is really, like I said, is devastating. But what we're going to see is this fire is going to continue to burn. It's burning in a lot more non-residential areas.
Chief, you must be seeing something I'm not, and I don't ever want to argue with an expert, especially on television. But we're watching flames. I don't know if you can see what we would call return, but our screen. We're watching flames come up the hills to homes right now.
Yep, you're right. But on the Eaton fire, much of the damage that was done in that was in that first 24 hours as we had such erratic winds. Now, one of our biggest threats is, as we've mentioned, is Mount Wilson.
Any idea when the National Guard will get here?
I do not. We just did a press conference. We know that they're coming. Law enforcement is working on possible curfews, but I don't have an ETA when they'll be here.
Got it. Chief, thank you very much. Godspeed to you and your men. As you point out, the fight's just beginning. The Los Angeles mayor held a press conference today on how her attempts to make everyone feel better, that is at least what she attempted to do, doing so exposed an awful truth about these fires. That when we come back. 3 nights, we've watched unbelievable images on our TV screens together. Homes burned into the ground with no firefighters in sight. Walls of fire running to the sea. Firefighters desperately running to burning homes, and their hoses empty because there is no water. And now large parts of America's second largest city look like Dresden after the firebombing of World War II. The California fires, are not the story of a Democratic failure, as most in the Republican or right-wing media would tell you. This story is one of Democratic success. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. The other destruction in California is the predictable result of policies and politicians that prioritize all the wrong things. Equity and diversity over competence, cow manure, methane capture rather than new water reservoirs, electric charging stations rather than brush clearing and best practices for fire mitigation, high-speed rail that nobody will use rather than burying power lines. I could go on and on and on. We did last night. California has had a Democratic governor since 2011, Democratic senator since 1992, a Democratic state legislature, both the Senate and the Assembly since 1997, a Democratic mayor of Los Angeles since 2001. It is a Democratic state. And we know the politicians know it's their policies that led to this destruction. They effectively told us, not with words, but with action. Here, for example, is what happened when Anderson Cooper of CNN asked a very simple question about no water for firefighting to Gavin Newsom.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in Palisades, ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter on this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out.
Not his problem. He's the governor. No idea about the water in the fire hydrants. After that, Newsom probably smartly stopped answering questions. Here he is today when confronted by a resident.
Governor, I live here, Governor. That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
I'm sorry. There's literally, I've tried 5 times. That's why I'm walking around to make the call.
Why is the president not taking your call?
Because it's not going through.
He's not alone. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass made her way back from Ghana to a press conference with some very reasonable questions for which she had 0 answers.
Can you address the criticism now over the budget issue and the slashing, $17 million slashing
I think
of the budget?
if you go back and look at the reductions that were made, there were no reductions that were made that would have impacted the situation that we were dealing with over the last couple of days. Right now, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL. We have to save lives.
Yeah, we have to save lives and we'll save homes, rest assured, rest assured. And then she told reporters to let her finish. Thousands of families watched their American dream burn to the ground on live television. The fires killed 5. That number will go up. Insurance companies will pay tens of billions of dollars in claims, which means rates for all of us around the country will go up. So now is exactly the right time to ask hard questions. And the stonewalling tells us everything we need to know. The utter destruction in California is the predictable result of policies and politicians that have prioritized all the wrong things and gotten their way. George Will is here, NewsNation senior political contributor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist. Good to see you, sir. Fairness check. Am I being fair in that analysis?
You are, and there's going to be an earthquake coming in California, the big real earthquake every once in a while. I mean, we've built a major metropolitan area in a desert on a tectonic fault. We're risking things. You ask for trouble in this naughty world, you get trouble, but there's going to be a political earthquake from this, Leland. The California government is so busy micromanaging life, from algebra classes in schools to the names of the schools, you name it. Just protecting endangered species, doing all these things. And people are going to say, can we get the basic things right? Public safety, basic elementary.
The fire hydrants working. Adam Carolla, of all people, the comedian, had some thoughts on the political earthquake. Take a listen.
All these people who were deep blue Democrats are now going to have to pull a permit to rebuild. And they're going to get the 28-year-old bitch from the Coastal Commission telling them to go f*** off. And then they're going to vote for Trump or whoever's Trumpian next.
California really is not going to go red.
It's not going to go red, but in presidential elections. But this is a tremendous opportunity for someone. And if Kamala Harris thinks that she can now, with her funding base and her name recognition, waltz into Sacramento as governor of California, she might want to think again.
Well, that's an excellent point in terms of what her priorities are. The famous line from Joe Biden, right? Show me your budget and I'll tell you your priorities. We can see it. They were not testing fire hydrants because they didn't have the money, but they kept their DEI office and other things. There is going to be a special session of the California State Legislature in the coming days, not to deal with the wildfires, but to authorize more money to fight Donald Trump. What is going to be the consequence? You said one for Kamala Harris, but for Gavin Newsom.
This is really just the last straw, but there's a mountain of straws about his record in California that has produced this enormous flight away from California. California, after the 2030 census, is apt to lose 4, perhaps 5 electoral votes, 5 congressional seats. Leland, this is, for the first time ever, California, since the 1840s, is losing population, and it's not just losing it, it's hemorrhaging population.
People vote with their feet, and I think we're seeing Donald Trump, of all things, seeing weakness, and that sort of nothing excites him more than that of Gavin Newsom, and he's piling on. Something else tomorrow that's happening, wanted to get you on. The sentencing in the Stormy Daniels business records hush money case in New York. Interesting development we're learning just in the past couple of hours is that while the whole trial was closed, all we had was sketch artists and notes from the court. Judge Merchan has decided that tomorrow, when he sentences Donald Trump, indicating he won't have a jail sentence, but when he sentences Donald Trump, there will be an audio feed. What do you make of that?
This is just the latest example of how large, important elements of the criminal justice system in the state of New York have been contributing to the revival and ascent and further ascent of Donald Trump. The country is so sick of this. I believe, Leland, that the nomination scramble was over on the Republican side when Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, elected prosecutor, who got elected vowing to get Donald Trump, indicted him on an accounting, bookkeeping measure.
There's something to be said. The people who have done the very most to elect Donald Trump are the people who hate him the most.
People forget that before Bragg made his move, there were polls showing Governor DeSantis of Florida ahead of Donald Trump.
That didn't last long.
They didn't last long, in part because Republicans rallied round against what they considered prosecutorial abuse, and they weren't wrong.
All right. Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much. Quick note about today's funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. All of the 5 living presidents gathered to honor one of their own. It's a uniquely American tradition. It's only fitting and proper that they do that. The fact that this tradition continues speaks volumes about what's right with our country, and there's a lot right with America. The office of the president is bigger than any one man, and that message to America and to the world really deserves a moment of reflection, a moment of celebration. There's no other country in the world that does this. We shouldn't take it for granted. Take this moment. Former President Barack Obama, President-elect Donald Trump were seen laughing like old pals together. Maybe they were talking about their handicaps. A gesture that will probably have Obama shunned some of the finer restaurants in Washington, New York, and Chicago, but it does send a clear message to everyone watching that 2 men on polar opposite sides of the aisle can come together for the country, for the idea of the country. There was Mike Pence and Trump sharing a handshake for the first time in 4 years. So events like this can repair old divisions. Mrs. Pence, though, did not get up or shake Donald Trump's hand. You can see her right there. Of course, there's one display that could have brought the country together. Kamala Harris, though, she just could not hide her contempt as she watched Obama and Trump chatting. She didn't even try to hide her contempt. Jill Biden's reaction to having to sit next to the woman who dethroned her husband was as cold as the weather here in Washington today, and it is brutally cold. We don't need a body language expert to tell us what those 2 women think of each other. So we'll end where we started, on this fraternity of men who have led this country, in the case of Bill Clinton, since 1993, through good times and bad times. And who better to represent that than the fraternity man himself, the former fraternity president, former President George W. Bush. There it is, the belly tap of Obama. Slowed it down. Even at a funeral, laughter sometimes is a thing that brings us all together. Something Trump and Obama talked about was, as we told you, awfully funny. We don't know what it is. But we do have a caption contest going for the picture. We wrote about that in War Notes, warnotes.com to subscribe for free. You can reply to the email with your thoughts, your caption. If you missed today's email, go to warnotes.com, subscribe, and let us know on social media, at Leland Vittert on Instagram and Twitter. Back now to the fires. Winds in the area continue to rise, and that is the real danger overnight, putting more homes and businesses in jeopardy, but more importantly, putting the lives of residents and firefighters at risk. And we are now learning the identities of some of the men and women who have perished. One story from that you cannot keep a dry eye when I tell you. We'll see you in a minute. Live pictures of yet another fire that has broken out in Los Angeles. This makes 6 fires, and the winds are picking up as the sun sets in Los Angeles. That is the true danger, because not only does it push the flames, but it also grounds the aircraft. And that is the only chance right now firefighters have because of these canyons and how close the canyons come to the homes built on the sides of the canyons. Andy Taylor, 30,000 hours in the air, many of them flying the aircraft right now that are over these canyons, dumping water and fire retardant. He joins us now. Andy, help just talk us through this. When we watch one of those big planes come in and drop fire retardant, what's happening? What has to happen for them to know where to go and know that it's safe?
You have a aerial supervisor up above that's coordinating all the aerial assets on that fire, and he's communicating with the ground ops and then relaying that back to whichever one of the tankers that are coming in and dropping on where to drop and the exit back out of the fire.
I'm watching these tankers fly, not quite at treetop level, but pretty close. This whole concept of the winds and everything dependent on that. You think about, 40 miles an hour that grounds everything?
That's true, and that all depends on what the wind's doing at the airport that they're taking off of. For the fars, the fixed wing too has a lot to do with it. But also in that terrain, when you've got that amount of wind or higher, it can get pretty dangerous for the pilots that are actually trying to get in there, because they do need to get within about 100 to 120 feet to the ground with the larger air tankers. And the smaller helicopters and smaller air tankers need to get within about 60 to 80 feet of the ground. So the wind and turbulence makes a lot of impact on what they can end up getting done.
We're watching some of the planes land on the water out in the Pacific, pick up their loads and head up. You say 120 feet off the ground. I'm just thinking about this. 120 feet off the ground, you're going 100 plus miles an hour sometimes in those larger aircraft up and down the canyons, 120 feet off the ground. We're talking about what, a half a second margin of error available?
Yeah. There's got to be very experienced pilots that are flying one of those airplanes. And unfortunately, it looks like they probably should have had some assets set in place prior to, when each one of them got started. Hopefully, before the wind picked up, they could have went and maybe got something done with it.
You've obviously watched these pictures a lot more than I have. You're seeing these fires move. These are live pictures right now, I believe, from KTLA's helicopter. What are you seeing? You've done this. What as a aerial firefighter would you be thinking watching these?
Well, just the way that fire's spreading right now, it's coming over some mountainous terrain and causing the wind to do some erratic things. And because you see it spreading out, not just in one direction, but about probably 360 degrees in direction. So that's getting to the point to where it's pretty hard for our assets to get in there to do anything to help the guys on the ground when it's that bad.
And tell me why it's so hard to fly in this.
Well, because the wind isn't just blowing in one direction. When it's going over that type of terrain, it ends up blowing in several different directions, and that creates some pretty bad turbulence.
All right, so these are live pictures of drops coming in, maybe not on the one fire we were looking at. we've seen these sort of much bigger planes, right? This is an old airliner, either a DC-9 or an MD-80 flying over. If they get, how many days do you need of these kinds of drops before we could actually, or the firefighters out there could get a handle on these fires?
That's a very tough question to answer. That all depends on what the relative humidity and the wind and the temperature does for the next several days. By putting retardant out in front of it, you're going to be able to slow it down and slow the intensity of the flames, but you're going to need the guys on the ground to get in there to be able to completely mop it up. Because one little spark or one little spot across the line will continue a whole new fire when it's blowing 40 or 50 miles an hour.
Tell me what's happening right now. I mean, it's pretty incredible to watch this live. Tell me what's going on. Is he looking for a place to drop?
He's getting direction right now from the aerial supervisor up above, and he's also making a decision on which way to be able to come in to make the drop safe for him with the wind and the terrain.
You want to come in with the wind and up canyon or against the wind and down canyon? What's the safest way?
The safest way is to be able to try to drop into the wind, but that doesn't always happen. And if you're dropping tailwind, that can get pretty erratic for the airplane.
Wow. You've got 30,000 hours in the air. There's no such thing as old and bold pilots, which says that you have sort of a unique understanding of the safety issues involved in this. Have you ever seen fires like this and destruction like this in a fire moving this quickly before?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you get the wind and the relative humidity and the fuel moistures and everything lines up. That behavior happens a lot in the summertime in a lot of different areas.
Probably none as populated as Los Angeles, though.
That's correct. That's the issue, is you got houses in amongst all of that.
I mean, one last question for you, and we started the program with this. Andrew Roberts, our producer, found this video of this place called Mount Wilson, which overlooks all of Los Angeles, has all the communication towers. If those get taken out by this Eaton fire, right now 0% contained, how dangerous is that?
Well, obviously, every one of the communication towers are going to go down. And that's one of the things that they're probably going to try to put retardant around and protect as much as they possibly can, those type of assets, and everybody else's home that they can try to protect. But if the winds come up like they did 2 or 3 days ago when they're blowing 80, 90 miles an hour, yeah. I hate to say it, but there's not a lot that the people on the ground or the air are going to be able to do about it.
All right. Andy, I want to say thank you very much for your expertise. I would not interrupt you normally. Donald Trump's speaking at Mar-a-Lago. Andy, thank you. We'll have you back. President-elect right now.
With the crime being out of control, all the other problems, they were not happy. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not they're going to build or whether somebody else is going to build and build a much lesser home. These were the most expensive homes outside of Palm Beach County. I see a list outside of Palm Beach. These were the most expensive homes anywhere in the world. And I think a lot of them are just not going to go back and build it. Plus, they don't want to be part of a construction site. They don't want to. They're building a home, another one's building. They're building in front of them, behind them, alongside of them. So I think it's a tragedy. I think it's an incredible tragedy. It's also a tragedy for a tax base. And the governors know exactly what I'm talking. And I'd like to hear anybody talk about that. But if you're the governor of a state and you lost thousands of very rich people that were paying a lot of taxes and weren't happy about it, and weren't happy about what's happened to California, which has all the advantages of greatness, but they've had horrible politicians. I think that Gavin is largely incompetent, and I think the mayor is largely incompetent, and probably both of them are just stone cold incompetent. What they've done is terrible. Would anybody have a comment on that? Because when you talk about losing the tax base, you're losing a lot of, you're going to lose a lot of those people permanently. Those people pay billions of dollars in taxes. Governor, what about you?
We got some great property in Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, they'll be moving to a lot of your states. They'll be moving to Florida, I can tell you. I know that. But they're going to be moving to, you're going to pick up a lot, Texas. So it's a rough situation. I've never seen, I think it's one of the great catastrophes in the history of our country. Not even believable.
President Biden's term, almost over. Before he goes, there's talk that he might trade a Gitmo al-Qaeda detainee, Mohammed Rahim, for 3 American hostages held by the Taliban. Should he do that?
Well, I haven't looked at it.
All right. Donald Trump taking questions at Mar-a-Lago. He's hosting governors from around the country. You heard him say that because of the fires in California, there's going to be a lot of people moving to red states, which, based on at least some of our reporting and what's happened in California, that seems to make an awful lot of sense. Live pictures back to California, where you can see the flames continuing to grow. And the real problem, as it gets darker, the winds are going to pick up. The problem is that even when people come back to ashes, nothing left, there's a very reasonable chance the insurance company will not be there to help them pick up the pieces. Why? When we come back.
Towns in the cities which were, largely demolished. And there are a lot of people in there, but the big surprise, and it's going to be a very unpleasant surprise, is how many people were killed in that war. It's much higher than the press is reporting. When a building comes down, these are big buildings. They're 2 and 3 blocks long, different kind of construction. They're long and not that tall in many cases, but they're 20 stories. But when a building like that comes down and they say nobody was injured, no, a lot of people were killed. I think the numbers are going to be much higher. And that's a war that would have never happened if I were president, and it's a war that I'm going to try really to stop as quickly as I can. The number of people dying on a daily basis, and I get the reports every single day, and largely soldiers at this point, but the number of people, both Russia and Ukraine, it's staggering.
When you threatened tariffs on Canada a couple weeks ago, Justin Trudeau rushed down here. He wanted to make nice. Now he's on the way out. Is that what you wanted?
I didn't think he was going to quit. He probably saw the numbers. Look, I called him Governor Trudeau because they should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state. And the people of Canada like it. They'd pay lower taxes. They have virtually no military. They have a very small military. They pay less than 1%. They're about the lowest payer in NATO. They're supposed to pay much more. They haven't been paying. They have a lot of problems. And I was with Wayne Gretzky. I said, Wayne, would you like to be the governor of Canada? I can't imagine anybody doing any better than Wayne. Wayne was not too interested. But I think he probably would have liked statehood. He's a friend of mine. He's a great guy. He's the great one. We call him the great one, right? He's a great hockey player. But I will say this. I think that there's, it was stated pretty strongly a couple of weeks ago about Canada, and people laughed. And now they're all saying, well, it's very interesting. And I say from the standpoint of the United States, we're subsidizing Canada $200 and $250 billion a year. We have massive deficits. They've taken about 20% of our car business. I'd rather do it here. We could put tariffs on. We don't have tariffs on them yet, but that will happen. But they've taken about 20% of our car business. I'd rather have it done in Detroit or have it done in South Carolina or any other state that does cars, and we have a lot of them. We don't need Canada for that. We don't need Canada for lumber because we have big forests that we have, not utilized. In some cases, they're protected, which I can take that protection off. And you take down a tree and you grow a better tree. That's, pretty common. But we don't need anything. We don't need their fuel. We don't need their energy. We don't need their oil and gas. We don't need anything that they have. And I said to Trudeau, I said, why are we subsidizing you $200 and $250 billion a year? He said, I really don't know. And I said, well, I don't know either. I said, what would happen to Canada if we didn't? He said Canada would be obliterated if that happened. I said, then Canada should be a 51st state. And that's where we are now.
A story that kind of disappeared very suddenly. Do you have any idea whatever happened to the drones?
What happened to drones?
Well, you had said that you thought the government knew what was happening with these drones over New Jersey. There were some by Bedminster.
I don't know. They're over Bedminster a lot, so I can imagine. I'm going to give you a report on drones about one day into the administration, because I think it's ridiculous that they're not telling you about what's going on with the drones. And it's not only with me. Glenn was telling me today that in Virginia they have drones all over the place, too, and nobody's reporting it. I don't know why they're not. Do you want to say something about that?
Just one quick comment, which is we are home to the largest naval base in the world in Quantico, and we house a lot of the SEAL teams and have a huge national security infrastructure. And now for 2 years running, we have had drone incursion over secure airspace, and we still don't know why. And I think that's absolutely unacceptable. And I think President Trump and the new leadership coming in, I think, will work diligently to understand who's behind this and what we do in order to stop the digital surveillance of all of our secure infrastructure.
Is it dangerous? Well, I can tell you this. While we were dealing with a terrorist attack in New Orleans, we had drones being flown over our nuclear reactors in Louisiana. And we brought that attention to the FAA. We've been asking the FAA to give these states the ability to mitigate these drones, and it's sitting on some bureaucrat's desk. And that's real.
Nobody knows. They don't want to talk about it. Go ahead, Governor, you were going to say?
I was just going to say we have drones in Wyoming flying over our infrastructure as well. And it's incredibly frustrating that we not only have no way of knowing what it is, but nobody knows how to deal with them.
They don't want to talk about it, and nobody knows why. They don't want to talk about it. That could be us sending drones. I hope that's the case, us doing it and doing research, and maybe they don't want to talk about it from that standpoint. I hope it's not an enemy, but we're going to find out on the 21st, the day after. You have to give me a little time for the inauguration, but shortly thereafter, we'll give you a report on it. We'll tell you exactly what it is. They know, and it's very strange that they aren't talking about it. Peter, thank you very much. Does Biden does he do this kind of a news conference now?
This is my longest ever interview of a president.
Yeah, well, the longest ever before this was one question, and they would rush you out of the room, right? But we have nothing to hide. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
All right, President Donald Trump there wrapping up at Mar-a-Lago, taking a dig at the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in terms of Joe Biden's history with press conferences. Certainly something very different than what we have seen now from President Trump, both a couple of days ago, about an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute long press conference. This was welcoming Republican governors to Mar-a-Lago there. Press conference started with a discussion about the fires in California. President Trump has gone after Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, quite extensively about the fires, about issues for the past 6 years of wildlife mitigation, clearing out brush or not clearing out brush, and also a huge complaint by Donald Trump and by others in California about the water issue. We know that there was no water for firefighters for days. Donald Trump has blamed Gavin Newsom for that, not only for diverting water that could have been used for the fires, but also not building the reservoirs around California and instead putting the funds to a number of other, shall we say, green initiatives that sound a lot better on the campaign trail for Gavin Newsom, things like electric car chargers and the like. Live pictures right now of Los Angeles County, and you can see as the sun is starting to go down, the fires are starting to pick up. And that is going to be the story tonight, that the winds are going to start pushing these fires back up the canyons and into the homes. There is now a sixth fire that is burning in California. And as we've seen, as our reporters have found, over and over and over again, folks come home or come back to what was their home to find ashes. And that is absolutely the only thing left, because the fires have run up and run over their homes without any firefighters. And here is the really tragic part of this story. A lot of them won't have insurance because State Farm, in particular, among other insurance companies, figured out what was so obvious, that California was not ready for these fires, They were not ready for fighting them. And when they did come, when the big one came, which this is, it was going to overwhelm and overrun large parts of California. There's now 50 billion plus in damages. That number is only going to continue to go up, and you can see the scorched earth lines right there. The only hope right now to prevent these fires from continuing to grow is aerial tankers coming in. We can see one of the drops coming in right now, and they are trying to, that's a C-130, an immense amount of fire retardant that can be dropped many times what the helicopters can drop. Those are the lifeline. If the winds ground the airplanes, they really have no chance on the ground. We are now entering the third night. So you think about fire crews that have been on the front lines now 24, 48 hours. They've gotten a little bit of rest. Sadly, they were not able to save everyone. The Washington Post and the Associated Press now report about Anthony Mitchell, a 67-year-old amputee, and his son, Justin. Justin had cerebral palsy. They were waiting for an ambulance to come get them. They didn't make it out, according to Mitchell's daughter. She said authorities told the family that Mitchell was found by the side of his son's bed in Alta Era. Washington Post reported the family believes Mitchell was trying to save his son. Quoting Mitchell's daughter now, this is the daughter of a 67-year-old man who died trying to save his 20-year-old son. He was not going to leave his son behind, no matter what. And those are the stories that are going to continue to come out of this fire. The death toll right now is 5. That number is going to go, sadly, far higher as folks get back to their homes. Here's Chris.